I'm Nintendo.
And I'm Sega.
This is Console Wars!
Doing here?
How many times do I gotta tell you? We're auditioning a guitar player for our band because this weekend is the Battle of the Bands.
That's right, we're in a band. Bass, drums. Got it. All right, bring in the auditions.
Hey, you guys. I'm really excited to be here.
Hey, okay, Jim. That was interesting.
We'll be in touch.
I'm not really good at guitar. I play bass. I'm really good at Eat It. You know, by Weird Al.
Can you play Beat It by Michael Jackson?
No.
All right, who's next?
Being a magician wasn't for me, but being a rock star is almost just as cool.
Very excited to have you, Terry.
Okay, now, where's your PS2? So I can hook this bad boy up. I don't want to brag, I'm a little bit of a medium god. Don't get me started on the orange button. I won't do it, I just won't.
Whoa, Terry, we need a real guitar player for our real band, not Guitar Hero stuff.
Wait, real band? Aren't you guys like 40? I think it's time to let the dream die, guys.
Ow. Okay, next.
Scorpion will now play the keyboards for his audition.
Wait, Scorpion. The tryouts are for guitar. We're not really looking for a keyboard player.
Scorpion will play what he wants. We'll suffer the torments and the flames of hell.
Yeah, keyboards are cool.
Let the man play. Hey, you know what? That was great. We'll be in touch.
Scorpion is not done. This song is 60 minutes long.
All right, this is the last guy.
Who are you?
Me am simple caveman.
Caveman. I'm part caveman.
Wait, I thought you were part monk that didn't drink alcohol.
Is that how that episode ended?
See what you got. All right, that was actually pretty good.
I think we found our guy. Me have problem. Sometimes me just fall asleep. Happens randomly. Happens when me play guitar. Happens when me talk. It could even happen right.
Right when? Right later?
Right now. He's got narcolepsy. He's asleep.
But he's standing up. What is he, a cow?
Oh no, it happened again. Did me fart? That happens sometimes too.
I don't know. What if he falls asleep in the middle of a show?
Wait. Dude, caveman in a band? That's just like Chuck Rock, the video game. Rocking out is in this guy's DNA. With him, we'll definitely win.
I guess. I mean, if he falls asleep, I could just wake him up.
Trust me, this guy's the goods. I know. I used to play Chuck Rock all the time. Well, for the Sega Genesis.
Right, but it was better for the Super Nintendo.
What? That's it! Are we doing this?
Is Snake Venom the strongest beer in the world at 67.5% alcohol by volume, brewed by Scottish brewery Brewmeister? Yes!
Best Chuck Rock game.
Chuck Rock is a side-scrolling platformer developed by Core Design in 1991. It was originally released for the Atari ST and Amiga. It was later ported to the Commodore 64, Amiga CD32, Sega Master System, Sega CD, Game Boy, and Game Gear. Today, we're looking at the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis versions.
The Super Nintendo game was published by Sony ImageSoft, and the Sega Genesis game was published by Virgin Interactive. Both games are very similar, but there are some differences. Which one's better? Let's find out.
The overall look of these games is the same.
Both games take place in a fictional prehistoric Stone Age. The main character, Chuck Rock, is a Neanderthal. He's got a big belly, huge jaw, not much hair, and wears leaves. He looks the same in both games.
And there's all types of creatures here too. There's prehistoric dinosaurs, insects, and fish. And there's other enemies too, like skeletons and fire creatures. Other than some palette swaps though, the enemies all look the same.
The levels pretty much look the same too. There's the jungle level, cave level, water level, ice level, and graveyard.
Character animations are the same too, whether it's Chuck, the enemies, or the bosses.
Very similar.
But there are some differences. Let's start with the obvious, screen resolution.
This happens almost every time. When games look identical, the Super Nintendo version is cropped. You see more of the Chuck Rock world on Sega Genesis. Not to mention the fact that the Super Nintendo game also has black bar lines all around the entire screen. So you're seeing even less than from just the cropping.
That's nothing. I'll take my crop game any day. It's more colorful.
Look at any two stages side by side and you'll see the Super Nintendo game looks more vivid. Look at this bland level on Sega. On Super Nintendo, bam! Color! The cave on Sega is a little monochromatic. Now Super Nintendo? Now that's a vibrant cave! You can pick any two stages and the Super Nintendo will have more color every time.
Yeah, well, it's easy to be colorful when your game's skimping in other areas.
The Sega game thrives where the Super Nintendo game cuts corners. Check out the swamp water on Sega. It's moving pretty good there. Now let's check out the swamp water on Super Nintendo. Huh, looking a little frozen there. Is it even water? And it's not just that, check out this fire on Sega. Look at it flash. Now let's check it out on Super Nintendo. Huh, fire's not doing anything.
Your game just cut so many corners.
My game cut corners? My game has so many more details than yours.
Again, look at these games side by side. There's so much more detail in the Super Nintendo game. And again, you can pick practically any stage. Not only is there more detail in the Super Nintendo, but it seems like there's times the Sega game didn't even try. Lots of times the Sega background is just black. Observe. Black background on Sega. More details on Super Nintendo. Black background on Sega. Colorful background on Super Nintendo. So many instances of the Sega game not putting much effort into the backgrounds.
Okay, the background's a little bland, but your game's still missing something.
Let's check out the cave. On Sega, there's parts of the cave where the screen shakes. On Super Nintendo, it doesn't shake at all. Once again, seems like the Super Nintendo game's cutting corners.
The Super Nintendo didn't cut any corners. Let's talk about the parallax scrolling.
The Super Nintendo game is loaded with parallax scrolling. Check out the clouds on the Super Nintendo level. On Sega, static. Check out the lava on this level. On Sega, you don't even have lava, just boring cave. Even when the background seems still on Super Nintendo, you'll see parallax scrolling when you move. You never see parallax scrolling on Sega, ever, whether you're moving or idle.
There's just so much more happening visually in the Super Nintendo game.
For having more vivid colors, having more detailed backgrounds, and having lots of parallax scrolling, best graphics go to Super Nintendo!
Presentation in both games is very simple.
Yeah, especially when it comes to the cutscenes.
There's not many cutscenes in these versions. All you really get's an ending, and they're pretty much the same. Most of the story is told in the instruction book. This is unfortunate because the original versions have an opening cutscene, which sets up the story and main villain. Not to mention other things. Yowza.
Yeah, the rest of the presentation's pretty much the same too.
The HUD during gameplay is very simple. You have your number of lives, life bar, and score. That's it. There's not even a scoreboard, so once again, the score is pointless. Other than that, both games start with a concert of sorts during the title screen, but nothing really happens here. That's actually Chuck on guitar wearing a wig and his wife Ophelia next to him.
So everything's pretty much the same.
Well, not exactly. The Sega game's a little more flashy.
Here's what happens when you beat a level on Super Nintendo. It's very bare bones. But here's what happens when you beat a level on Sega. Whoa, so flashy, so classy. Definitely better.
What, that? I have a real reason my presentation's better. Let's go to the endings.
Here's what happens when you beat the Sega game. Okay, that's a decent picture, I guess. But now check out the Super Nintendo. Okay, but where's Ophelia? Whoa, look at her slide. And Chuck with the flip. And if you like that, wait till after the credits. Whoa, More sliding. There's no sliding or flipping on Sega.
Yeah, your game needs the sliding because, again, cropping. With the cropping on Super Nintendo, you don't even see the full picture. The dino's crown is completely out of frame, unlike on Sega.
That's still not that impressive. Besides, my title screen's better.
The Super Nintendo title screen has Chuck Rock appear using Mode 7. On Sega, no Mode 7. Everything's just there.
You really think your title screen's better? Think again. The title screens look identical, until you look closer. On Sega, it's a little more impressive. First off, the Super Nintendo title screen is cropped and has no trees and only one speaker. That's pretty lame. But here's the more impressive part. On Sega, the characters actually move when their instrument is being played. Watch the dinosaur when the bass kicks in. It's pretty cool. And he stops moving when the bass drops out. Now watch Chuck on lead guitar. He only moves his hands when you hear the lead. And Ophelia switches from guitar to keys at the right time too. For a game called Chuck Rock, they actually nailed the rock part. And how do they sync the movement with music on Super Nintendo? They didn't. They just randomly move. Chuck doesn't move with the lead part. The bass playing dinosaur even moves when the bass stops. And Ophelia doesn't even move at all during the keyboard part. I think she died. Nowhere near as cool as the Sega game. Such nice attention to detail. It's pretty close, but the Sega game does have an edge. For more flashy title cards, seeing the whole ending, but for having a most impressive title screen that actually follows the music, best presentation goes to Sega Genesis. Our games have the same music and sound effects.
They're not exactly the same.
Music and sound effects on Super Nintendo were by Steve Collette.
Music and sound effects on Sega were by Chrysalis Software Limited.
A lot of the same songs.
But I think my quality's better. The melody of the song sounds so exciting, chiptuned on Sega. They sound so boring with the Super Nintendo organ.
What? No way. Besides, my game has more songs than yours.
The Super Nintendo game has a boss theme. The Sega game just speeds up the music from the level, like it's on crack or something. The Super Nintendo game also has an ending theme. The Sega game just plays that sped up music from the last boss.
So I'm missing 2 songs. My quality's still better.
Fine. Let's talk about sound effects then.
The sound effects on Super Nintendo are much clearer than the Sega. Every time you start a level, Chuck says, "Hunga Bunga." It's nice and clear on the Super Nintendo.
Bunga bunga.
It's incredibly distorted on Sega.
Bunga bunga.
Also, when you begin a boss battle on Super Nintendo, Chuck says, "Uh-oh."
Uh-oh.
On Sega, he just says, "Hunga Bunga" again. And it's not just Chuck, even the enemies sound better on Super Nintendo. Here's a saber-toothed tiger on Super Nintendo. Now on Sega. Here's a dinosaur on Super Nintendo. Now on Sega. It's just so distorted.
Sound is definitely better on Super Nintendo.
For having an exclusive boss and ending theme, and for having much cleaner sound effects, best sound goes to Super Nintendo.
Uh-oh.
Gameplay is practically identical.
Like I said before, these games are side-scrolling platformers. In both games, you play as Chuck. You have one button to jump and one to attack. That's it. Chuck's attack is referred to as a belly butt. Right, he's definitely not humping. Chuck can also jump kick.
You can't jump on enemies. The only way to kill them is to hump them, belly butt them, to jump kick them, or you can, wait for it, chuck rock. Chuck small and big rocks to kill enemies. Rocks also protect you from boulders and falling objects. But not everything is out there to kill you. Some creatures can help you. You just gotta belly butt them. Or chuck rock at them.
There are 5 levels in both games. Each level is made up of 3 to 5 stages. The objective is very easy. Just get to the end. And every level ends with a boss fight.
Simple games.
But they are challenging.
These games don't have a password or save, so you gotta beat them in one shot. Once you're out of lives, it's game over.
It's a quirky game that didn't age horribly, but it still has its flaws.
Boss battles are a mixed bag. They can range from, okay, I figured out the pattern, to, I don't know what I'm doing, to humping them mercilessly. Easiest boss in the game.
Some things are surprisingly good though, like the water stages.
The water stages are actually some of the best controls in 16 bits. It's not like a typical water level where you're constantly sinking and need to tap a button to stay afloat. You automatically float up. You just move the D-pad in the direction you want to go. And you move really fast. You can attack while doing this too. You're just cruising through the water, taking out enemies really fast. It's incredibly easy and satisfying. I wish more water stages played like this.
So what are we gonna do? Our gameplay is pretty much identical.
Not exactly. The Sega game actually has something the Super Nintendo doesn't.
The Sega game has an options menu. You can turn off the music and sound effects. The Super Nintendo game does not have an options menu.
Turning off music and sound effects doesn't affect the gameplay.
It's still something. But let's talk about the screen resolution.
The larger screen resolution on Sega really helps when it comes to gameplay. First off, lets you see everything. You want to see platforms in your platformer, right? They can be easy to miss on Super Nintendo. Second, makes it easier to avoid enemies. Lots of enemies fly at you, whether it's birds or frozen dinosaurs. A larger screen resolution gives you more time to prepare to avoid damage. The smaller screen resolution of the Super Nintendo doesn't afford you that time.
That's a little bit of a reach. The games still play the same.
Well, here's a difference you can't deny. Let's talk about the environments.
I already mentioned the way that the caves shake on Sega. I wanted to add it here as it does give the game a sense of urgency not found on Super Nintendo. But there's another major difference to gameplay. I'm talking about the ice level. On Sega, the ice is slippery. It makes sense. This is done in lots of games. On Super Nintendo, you don't slip. The ice may as well be grass or rocks. It doesn't matter. There's no slipping on the Super Nintendo. Almost makes the ice levels pointless. Somebody got lazy making this game.
Well, not slipping makes my game easier. You're gonna get a game over way faster on Sega.
Oh, you think so? Let's talk about that.
When you lose all your lives on Sega, you get a continue. It's only one, but it's better than nothing. When you lose all your lives on Super Nintendo, you die. Game over. No continues on Super Nintendo. Not a one. They really made it difficult to beat the game.
The Super Nintendo game isn't that much harder than yours.
It kinda is. Let's check out the scores again.
Like we said before, both games have a score. Kinda pointless since there's no scoreboard. Or is it? Every time you get 100,000 points on Sega, you get a 1-up. Every 100,000 points. What happens when you get 100,000 points on Super Nintendo? Nothing. You don't get 1-ups on Super Nintendo. Ever. Not 100, not 200,000 points. Points are pointless on Super Nintendo. Don't risk your life for the 10,000 point items. It's not worth it at all. You want to avoid any exploring on Super Nintendo since you'll just risk dying. Explore all you want on Sega. It could lead to points for an extra life.
These games are almost identical, but the Sega game does have a slight edge.
For having an options menu, for having a better screen resolution, for having the ice be slippery, for having a continue, and getting an extra life every 100,000 points, best gameplay goes to Sega Genesis.
These games are almost identical, but one game is better, and that game is Chuck Rock for the Sega Genesis.
It may not have the color, details, or parallax scrolling, but it still looks pretty good. It has better presentations for the flashy title cards, and one more musically accurate title screen. It has solid quality songs, but not as many as the Super Nintendo game, and the voiceovers are a bit rough. But it has better gameplay with an options menu, a larger screen resolution, slippery ice, a continue, and the ability to get extra lives. The Super Nintendo game's fine, it looks and sounds a little better, but it's flawed in the gameplay department. Wider screen resolution really makes a difference. And it's unnecessarily much harder with no continues or extra lives. Exploration is completely pointless. All these items from the Super Nintendo manual, just ignore them. The Sega game gives you a fighting chance and has the more complete gameplay. Best Chuck Rock goes to Sega Genesis.
Alright, let's go win the Battle of the Bands!
You sure about the caveman?
Oh, it'll be fine. Trust me.
Alright, and now we're finally on to our last band of the night. Everybody give it up for Console Wars!
I love retro gaming. I love retro gaming. I'm a retro gamer for life. Write passwords down on things about me. Get cheat codes from a magazine. Play all my games on the CRT. Alright. Blowing in cartridges gets me high. Pixel art makes me feel alive. Chiptune music keeps me satisfied for life. I love retro gaming. I love retro gaming. I'm a retro gamer for life.
Dude! What are you doing? What?
Oh man, I'll wake him.
Oh no! I'll get him! Whoa!
Where did those banana peels come from?
You're weak now.
Huh, that was an interesting ending. But it is not for us to judge. That's what the judges are for. Let's hear from judge number 1.
Of course, it was a shame about the ending, but I like the caveman. They get my vote. Yabba-dabba-doo!
Okay, that seemed a little biased, but let's hear from our second judge.
I wasn't listening, but they get my vote. I like the caveman.
Okay, 2 cavemen in a row voting for a band with a caveman in it. Let's go to our final judge, who is definitely not a caveman.
What's up, buddy? Definitely not a caveman, because I'm a wizard. Anyways, I like the caveman. Reminds me of my friend Link. They get my vote.
Okay, I guess I should have seen that coming, but looks like we got some winners. Let's give it up for the Console Wars band. Yeah, go ahead and clap. It's gonna hit my chest.
We won?
We won.
I love retro gaming. I love
Thanks for checking out our latest video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Special thanks to JediKnight Mark for his donation of the games. Support us on Patreon for early releases, bonus content, and the Discord. And check out our live channel, Console Wars Live, for live streams and more. And check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Console Wars goodness. Later.
Bean. Oh, Mr. Bean, never Mr. Bean. Oh, very good, very good.